Lesson number 7. What is a power? Well, powers are just shortened ways to write long, complicated stuff. So let's talk about exponents here. So what we have is we have a number down here, the 5. That's known as the base. The 3 up the top here means the exponent, and the whole thing together is known as the power. And what 5 to the 3 means in this case, it doesn't mean 5 times 3. That's the most common mistake. It means you're going to multiply the base by itself 3 times. So here's the power. 5 to the 3 equals 5 times 5 times 5. When you write it out that way, that's repeated multiplication. And then equals 125 is our standard form, the answer. So here's a good example. 3 times 3, oh, it goes on for a long time. Well, how many 3's do we have there? We have 7. So we can shorten it up and write it 3 to the 7. That's much easier than writing all those 3's out. What about 7 times 7 times 7? Oh, that's 7 to the 3. 7 times 7, 7 to the 2. Oh, what about 7 just by itself? Well, you can actually write it as 7 to the 1. It's so common we don't actually write it, but any number that you have just by itself can have an exponent of 1 up the top. Okay, flip to the second page. So if you notice, these ones are in brackets. We do that because we got negatives here. So negative 3 times, oh, how many negative 3's do we have here? We got 4 of them. So negative 3 to the 4. And then you got to be careful. The negative 3 is in brackets, so we end up with positive 81. Negative 3 here to the 4. Okay, well, the 4 goes with the 3. It doesn't go with the negative. So the negative is kind of sitting out the front there. If you want, you can write it as a negative 1 just to keep yourself organized with that one. But it's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 81, and then becomes a negative. Same with the 4 here. Negative 4 to the 3. That negative's kind of out the front there. So 4 times 4 times 4 is negative 64. Oh, look at this one. Negative 4 in brackets to the 3. Well, that's negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. And if you remember, a negative times a negative is a positive, and then times a negative again is a negative. So no matter which way these two are written, this one or this one, you end up with negative 64 as the answer. Well, we can base a rule on that. So if we have negative 1, and we have an even number up here, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, our answer is going to be positive. If we have negative 1 in here and our number up here is odd, right? So like 3, 5, 7, it's going to be negative 1. So I could give you a question like negative 1 to the 200th, and you would know right away that it's a positive 1 because that's an even number. Okay, what happens if we do this now? Negative 1 to the 6. Well, we know this part here, the negative 1 to the 6 is going to be positive, but then we multiply by negative on the outside. It becomes negative 1. What about negative 1 to the 5? That's odd, so we know our answer here is going to be negative 1, and then times the negative is going to be a positive. These are really simple rules, but they'll help you in more complex questions when dealing with positives and negatives. Okay, flip to the last page, the third one. Let's deal with some fractions here. So 1/2 squared. That doesn't mean 1/2 times 2. It means 1/2 times 1/2. So we can write it out this way, or 1/4. Okay, then we can do negative 3/2 cubed, or to the 3. It means negative 3/2 times negative 3/2 times negative 3/2. Now think about this. A negative times a negative is a positive, times another negative is a negative. So we know our answer is going to be negative. And then just multiply straight across. 3 times 3 times 3, 27. 2 times 2 times 2, 8. You could leave it as improper form if you want, negative 27 or 8, or change it to mixed form if you want. It doesn't matter. Okay, negative 2/3 squared. That means negative 2/3 times negative 2/3. And a negative times a negative is a positive. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. Leave it in that form. Okay, negative, in brackets, negative 1/3 cubed. Now remember, the negative 1/3 in here is the stuff that's going to be cubed. So you can keep your negative out the front there if that keeps you organized. So negative 1/3 times negative 1/3 times negative 1/3. Okay, negative times a negative is a positive, times a negative is another negative, and then times the negative out the front is going to be a positive, right? I always try to figure out the signs first because it's easier to do that and then go along with the rest of the math. 1 times 1 times 1, 1. 3 times 3 times 3, 27. Okay, so you got to get the rules for positive and negatives pretty much under control there. And now you can work on that on practice number 7.